Hi, I'm Carroll Moore. I'm the published author of 13 books in 3 genres, and I've taught thousands of writers around the world this technique that you're about to learn, called storyboarding for writers. So first we're going to talk about how storyboards are used in book structuring. When I began writing and publishing books back in the 1980s, I had the fortune of working with publishers who had in-house editors, something that's very rare nowadays. So the editor showed me how I could take my raw material and flow it into a manuscript form. But a lot of writers starting out today have no idea how to take all the islands of material that they're writing and make a structure that other people can understand and enjoy. So when I came across a book called A Writer's Time by Kenneth Atchity, I learned about storyboarding as a way of organizing and structuring the islands that I was writing. That meant I could continue writing random segments of my book, but I knew eventually I would be able to flow them into something that would make sense to someone other than myself. One of the most important tools to generate for yourself before you even think about storyboarding is a brainstorming list of topics. I usually start with 25. I number my page 1 through 25, and I just brainstorm everything I can imagine to be in my book, even if I haven't written it yet. Or it can be things that I've thought about and drafted, but just start this list, and this list will become your list of islands. One of the most important tools to use when you're starting your storyboard is something called the 3-act structure. And this wasn't something I dreamed up. It's used in classic literature all over the world. Aristotle was actually the first person to bring it to light. And the idea is that it gives emotional catharsis to an audience because it has a clear beginning, middle, and end, which most books need. So if you pay attention to the 3-act structure as you're using your storyboard, you'll be able to present your material, even if it's a story that no one else has lived but you, in a way that other people can understand. So when I started looking at 3-act structure, I was looking at it in terms of a nonfiction book, a memoir, and a novel. And I asked myself, could I actually use the 3-act structure in a storyboard for any genre of my writing? And it worked. I could. Each genre has its own arc or pathway that the reader will travel to get to the point of the story, but they all work within the 3-act structure. So the W structure in storyboarding looks a little complicated when you start, but it's actually really, really simple to use. You need to find 5 points of your book that are the most important. The 5 points represent the 5 touchstones, or the points of the W, starting with the top left where the W starts, going down to the bottom, then up again, down, and up. So we have different kinds of movement in a storyboard, the rising action and the falling action. So let's start with the first point of the W, number 1. This is called the triggering event. In every book, there's an outer event that starts the action. This starts the story. It might be a birth or a death. It might be the start of a voyage. It might be the discovery of some secret in a family. It might be a mystery starting to be solved. So some of these will always come up as you're writing your islands. And you have to choose the most important event that you think launches the book, without which the whole story couldn't happen. So this is your triggering event. And that's the first thing you have to decide and place on your storyboard. So from the triggering event, we go to what's called the first turning point. And you notice that because we're going down the W, we're setting up a problem. In literature, it's very rare that a book will start and get better. The story can't get better because there's no tension, no momentum, no reason for us to keep following the story. So you have to choose your islands now as you're storyboarding in terms of this lowering action or increasing of the drama. When you get to the first turning point, or number 2 on the storyboard diagram, this is the first low point of the book. The triggering event starts things, but this is where things bottom out. I liken it to the roller coaster. You're going down, down, down the track, and you hit a point where things bottom out. At that point, the first turning point, it's called a turning point because the action takes a turn now. Things often reverse. They go into the opposite of what you expect. Maybe new information is discovered, new hope is given, and a new idea comes to light. So people in the story start moving in an upward direction towards the middle of the book, which is Act 2. This first triggering event to the first turning point, this is Act 1. This sets up your story. Now we're recovering from the problem. We're going to the place where the hope or new ideas or new information or help comes into the story. And we get to the place at the top of the roller coaster grade, and then, uh-oh, things are changing again, another reversal. One of my students in a class called this the pop moment. And I don't know why he called it the pop moment, but it's almost like popcorn in a popping container starts to really percolate, and suddenly things just explode. And at that pop moment, which is the top of Act 2, things change again. So now you're going to go down the roller coaster grade. The problem will deepen and worsen. Sometimes people also call that the second triggering event. It's a lesser event than the first one, but it's important in that it starts new downward action. So the reason behind the W is that you don't stay in a straight line. Straight lines are very boring in literature. You have to have movement up and down. So from this point of Act 2, the pop moment, we go down, down, down the grade with a deepening of the problem until we get to the second turning point. This is absolutely the lowest point in the book. This is where things seem to have no hope. All of the things you've tried don't work. The character is faced with the absolute worst possible scenario, and they have to get out of it. So new hope usually comes, new help usually comes, or the character makes a change inside herself, and the last act, Act 3, starts. And you notice on the W that Act 3 is a movement upward. Solving the problem is a good way to name it, but a lot of times in literature, problems aren't actually solved, but new light comes to them, or new understanding, or a change inside the person. So there's a sense of completion or a sense of change, and that's the important thing that Act 3 needs to show. Then we end up at the last point, which is the end or resolution moment. In fiction, in this trajectory between the second turning point and the last moment of the book, there's often a place right here, and that's called the epiphany moment. Sometimes we call it the oh my God point. In mysteries, it's the crisis point, where things are taken to the worst state after that second turning point, and then you have a few chapters of resolution after that. It depends on the genre. So you may have another point right here that will be a complication. That's essentially the W. And if you can go through the material you have for your book and decide which are the 5 most important points and place them, knowing what's going to come after them, you'll actually be using the W really well. So for instance, if you have events that are negative or increasing a problem, you know they have to go between point 1 and point 2 or point 3 and point 4. They can't go on the upward slide because they don't give that kind of effect to the reader. So it becomes a great formula for where to place the different scenes in your book. Some people ask if you have to follow the W in straight lines. Actually, no. You can have it be like a heart graph so that each of these lines can have little ups and downs all the way down and up them. And that way you don't have to pick all positive events and all negative events. They can vary. But generally, if you look at the group of events in your book that you're collecting in Act 1, they have to be on a downslide. In Act 2, like an upside down V, partly upside, partly downside. Act 3 always has to be climbing. So this is a great way to actually segregate the different events in your book and decide where to place them on a storyboard. Some people are naturally random oriented. They're very strong in the right brain. They love to play with the islands, and they hate the linear organization of storyboards. Storyboards drive them crazy. I have that kind of love-hate relationship with storyboards myself. So I've made them as friendly as possible. I've done them in bright colors with beautiful different colored post-it notes. I've done them as visual maps with colored pictures cut from magazines. I've tried to engage the nonlinear side of myself as I do the storyboard, and it makes it a lot more fun. But if you get blocked by your storyboard, if your mind starts to engage in a very linear fashion and you find yourself not writing anymore, Stop the storyboard and go back to the brainstorming list and just keep generating islands for a little while. And that will get you unblocked. And then you can gently come back to the organization tool. You're going to eventually need to organize your islands. The islands must become continents. They can't stay as islands and create a book. So there's a point where storyboards have to happen. It may just not be now for you, but if it is, and if you can see the beauty and the value in storyboards, go for it. Do a little bit. Don't try to complete the whole thing. I have mine up in my office, in my writing room, and I just add to it whenever I get an idea. And it becomes like a friend after a while. It's not something threatening me or taking away my creativity. It gives me great organization and a real visual map for my book journey. Storyboard should change and grow as your book evolves. If the storyboard becomes this static, archaic thing hanging out in your writing room, it's really not going to serve your book. So as you write more islands, you get more ideas of where you want to go. Say you're developing a new theme, a new character comes into your story, a new location. You need to take time to go back to the storyboard and adjust it and make sure it actually reveals and reflects the journey that your book is taking. It's not something you do once. I usually do 3 storyboards for every book, the same storyboard, but 3 different ways. The first one is my draft. The second one, when I'm in revision, I go back to my storyboard and I make sure it's true. And then again, I'll do one right at final edit to make sure things like theme and voice and pacing are reflected in the storyboard. Do I have enough inner story? Do I have enough outer story? Is the dilemma strong enough? All these things are really carefully answered by your storyboard in a way that I've never found another tool to do. Thanks for joining me today for Storyboarding for Writers.